hopefully, oh, it's really loud.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So we're here with Elise Hicks. We're excited to have her back. She did a talk for us for Young Riders last summer. And Elise went to Young Riders in 2019 in Montana and then also competed up to intermediate on her horse Max. I was lucky enough to get to teach Elise when she was coming through. And now she's an adult and you're a psychotherapist. Is that
Yeah.
the right? Yeah. Okay. So now she's got a real job and putting all her competition mental side all to use in her real life, helping everyone else. So I'm sure she has a better way to explain what she does.
No, thank you. Thank you. No, I'm excited to be here today. As mentioned, I did do a little webinar last year. So this year I'm more excited so I get to do a bit of a two-part series. So this one's going to be more about post-season reflection, and it can be specifically for 2025 or many other seasons beyond that if there's something that you can relate to with that as well. And it's kind of more interactive in the sense of about awareness about mental performance. So we'll get started as people come in as well. But in terms of what we're going to cover, I'm just going to very briefly go over what mental performance is again, in terms of what we went over last year. I picked three common ones, most common ones that come up in terms of athletes and riders as well. So we're going to cover topics of performance anxiety, emotion regulation, and burnout, and awareness about that, and trying to understand what it is, symptoms, signs, to try and generate that awareness as well. And then after each kind of topic we go through, I'm going to have a bunch of reflective questions or prompts that you don't necessarily need to answer out loud in those moments. It's kind of for reflection. During those times, maybe it would be helpful if you had either a pen and paper or a notes app on your phone, for example, if that's more handy, to kind of go through these questions and see which ones resonate with you more, if you can answer them as you follow along. And then we'll go through a bit of a discussion. We will do the Q&A at the very end, an opportunity to ask for certain strategies or specific challenges that you want to learn about in the next session. That's going to be more strategies and tools are going to be given in the next one. So you can ask for certain things that you'd like covered, as well as any questions that come up for today. But for the sharing portion, we'll do that beforehand. In terms of anyone wants to share their experiences, I'll probably be sharing some of mine briefly as we go along. So feel free to share yours at the end there as well. And if there is any questions that come up throughout, I won't necessarily be able to see them. So if you can either put them in the chat or just kind of save them for the end, that would be helpful in that sense too. So we'll get started, but Kendall gave me a brief intro already, so I'll very quickly go through this. In terms of my equestrian experience, I've been in the industry for 19 years, in terms of started riding when I was 6. In terms of eventing specifically, I've been in that industry for 12 years. It would be longer if I hadn't, taken a break for the last few years to finish school and start my career. But in terms of that, in the eventing industry, I did have experience at Young Riders in 2019, which was an amazing experience at the 2-star level with my horse Max, and some FEI experience in Florida, and yeah, provincially up to the intermediate level. Professional experience, something a bit different. So now I'm a registered psychotherapist qualifying. So I'm registered with the CRPO, fully done school. I'm working in a few different areas of expertise for therapy, but one being with athletes. So I do work with all kinds of athletes, and also I like talking with riders and doing these group sessions. It's more my passion that way to be able to help in the field that I've been in for so long. And also newly this year, I'm working on as a mental health support member for the Grit team. I was a rider on the team a while ago, and so now I get to give back to that community as well. So I'm really excited about that. So that's just a bit about me in terms of riding experience, but also professional. So now let's get started. What is mental performance? So very briefly, it's the psychological skills and mindset that allow yourself, riders, to perform to the best of their ability under pressure. So some of the kinds of mental challenges that come with mental performance, there's quite a few different ones. I picked 3 for today that are most common and come up a lot. So we're targeting more performance anxiety, emotion regulation, and burnout today. So again, going to go through what those are, what they mean, what the symptoms are, how can you have some awareness if that's something that maybe you struggle with in terms of riding in competition as well. So we'll start with performance anxiety. So performance anxiety is more of intense nerves that come on approaching a competition or right before entering the ring. So that's something that can occur a minute before you go into the ring, an hour, a day, a week, a month, and any time that it affects you in the onset of these intense nerves that come on before a competition. So some of the symptoms and things that come up for performance anxiety are really tight muscles and restricted breathing. Now, as riders, you could understand why that is not good in terms of why that's a problem, right? We have tight muscles, whether that's a lot in our upper body, sometimes it's like back, your hands, that range of motion for your elbows, shoulders, that can all tighten up and really restricts your, rein aids, as well as your hips or your legs and how you restrict your horse in that way. And that those can come up when you're feeling anxious before the performance. And restricted breathing. That's hard too as well. Overthinking distances or movements. So that can be like a week or a day. Let's say you've maybe walked your course already and, leading up to the day of, overthinking certain jumps and kind of worrying about certain jumps a lot, consistently, or certain movements of the dressage test as well. A significant fear of making mistakes. So focusing more on the mistakes that could happen. So you walk you do your thing, your dressage test, you walk your show jump course or cross country course, and you're kind of have this fear of making a mistake. Maybe it's something that's come up previously that's causing you to feel that way, but it's more of an intense fear of that. And negative thoughts, things like, what if you get eliminated? What if I mess up? Those kind of thoughts that happen that cause you to contribute to the anxiety and make it worse as well. Or avoidance of showing or moving up level. Sometimes if you have pre-performance anxiety, or performance anxiety in general, there's sometimes that behavior of avoiding shows or avoiding moving up the levels to avoid that anxiety onset as well. So those are just a few in terms of the symptoms that can come up with that, but it has a pretty significant effect on you and your horse when you're trying to compete and your ability to perform under pressure in that sense as well, and how well you do. So in terms of that, we kind of briefly mentioned that of tension in the reins. So, you're really anxious about a show you have coming up. You're there at the show, you're warming up, but your nerves are so intense. There's a lot of tension in your hands and your reins and the motion that you have. You're pulling on your horse's face more than you would normally in your training. And it's something that affects your horse that way. Some inconsistent aids. If you're tense and jittery and your breathing escalates in terms of very fast breathing, giving inconsistent aids in that sense as well. Another thing about performance anxiety is it can contribute to your loss of memory from things that you learned in training. So inconsistent aids being not remembering exactly the aids that you learned in training and being able not remembering them in the moment. Or altered breathing patterns. If your breathing starts to race really, really fast, your horse's tummy feels that against your legs, right? And you're immediately kind of telling your horse that there's something to be scared of or worried about, and they can feel that shift. As well as tightness in the hips and the legs. So your range of motion, let's say you have an extended canter in the dressage test and you're so nervous that your kind of legs are not flowing the way that they should be, and therefore you're not going to get that movement that you want. So a lot of different ways that it affects you, but also your performance in terms of how it affects your horse as well, because you're a team in this sport. In terms of what your pre-performance can contribute to for your horse, that's rushing. So we see that sometimes when you're feeling really nervous and your horse appears to be rushing a bit more, or maybe it's you kind of causing that rushing through nerves as well. We also see that resistance when we talk about tension in the reins as well. There's a bit more resistance than there normally is, and that can affect your performance that way. Spooking and alertness. So when you're feeling anxious, you can sometimes create a horse that's not necessarily spooky and have them be more alert. Or if you have a horse that's naturally spooky, it can contribute to their increased alertness. So that's hard as well in terms of rideability. Loss of rhythm. So that's kind of that, tightness in the hips and legs as well, in terms of how when you're tight and your muscles are tight that way, you lose the rhythm. I've had a lot, I've had some experience in that for sure. For example, myself at one time, doing an upgrade to a level, I went into show jumping and was so nervous. My body was so tight. I completely lost the rhythm and I got eliminated on jump one because I couldn't get over the first jump because I was so nervous and it was affecting my body so badly. I was basically telling my poor horse to stop because I didn't have any rhythm going into it. And I was creating that tension. So for me, it contribute to refusals, it contribute to rails as well. So a lot of ways that it can come into play and how it can affect your performance. So we had this question last time. I wanted to talk about this a little bit. Last year, when we talked about anxiety, we kind of talked about when is it good and when is it bad. So I want to just go over the difference a little bit there as well, because there's definitely times where pre-performance nerves can be good. And then there's pre-performance anxiety. So that's kind of when it hinders your performance in that way. So for example, when we talk about, good performance nerves, there's kind of that excitement, you're feeling a bit nervous in that sense. It's a new environment. You're going into something you're performing, right? So sometimes that can feel more like butterflies or maybe slight tingles. There's something there in terms of nervousness, but it actually helps you focus. So a lot of times people will say, I like being a little bit nervous because then I focus a lot more, I'm more motivated. So that's good nerves. Those are helpful nerves to help you perform better, increases your focus. It adds good pressure in terms, maybe it's people watching, maybe it's just the pressure of the environment, the show, it's fun. So it adds some pressure for motivation to perform well. It puts some more pressure on from regular training to kind of perform well. So that's good. That's a good thing. Those are good pre-performance nerves. When it becomes pre-performance anxiety, it's when it's affecting your performance negatively. So that's when you're kind of forgetting skills on course. So maybe it's certain aids that you've learned in training that you're forgetting to use in those moments because the nerves are there and because the anxiety is there. It can be forgetting elements in your course and test. So forgetting an element in your dressage test, skipping a step, missing a jump on cross country or show jumping because of that mental fog, because of the anxiety there and causing you to kind of blank when those nerves get really intense. Um, Also can cause significant tenseness, which of course impacts your ability to ride in that sense as well. Sometimes in other cases, it can be physically ill, shakiness, that shakiness being physically ill, maybe it's nausea. Otherwise as well, when it's coming up in that way, that's more anxiety. And it impacts the horse's stress level. So when you're feeling that more intense anxiety and anxiousness, then your horse becomes more anxious and nervous. That's more of an anxiety piece as well. Because hopefully in good nerves, you're feeling a little bit nervous, but still calm enough and positive. Anxiety can sometimes be a bit more negative in that sense, and your horse can really pick up on that too. So that's a bit of a distinction in terms of the difference between when it's helpful and when it's not helpful. So, in terms of reflection questions, this is kind of a part where if you do have a pen or paper or even a notes app on your phone, if that's more convenient for you, I want to kind of go through some of these reflection questions. And we're going to go through this on each topic and step. And I'll walk you through these ones and I'll tell you how you can make it more specific. So, first question being, what happens in my body before I enter the ring? So this is kind of reflecting on that awareness piece. What happens for you before you're about to enter the ring? Do you feel yourself tense up? Do your shoulders maybe come a bit higher? Do you feel your heart racing faster before you enter the ring? What happens for you when that happens? And what happens, does it change based on the phase, the event that you're doing? Is it more prevalent in dressage, more prevalent in cross country? When does it happen more for you? When you notice a more significant difference? And to take it another step further, does it happen more at certain shows than others? Is it more intense when you're doing a qualifier, for example, or, upgrading a level or a certain venue? Kind of notice what are some differences there. Do I sometimes forget the course or an element of my test due to the nerves? Has that ever happened to you? Again, kind of making that more specific. What phase was it in? What was coming up for you? What kind of show was it as well? Another piece to take that further. Does my breathing change at competitions? So trying to notice when that happens and within reason. Of course, I would expect that your breathing might increase a little bit in terms of that, especially, you're about to go in the ring, especially for cross country, adrenaline. Of course, we're going to have our heart rate increase, right? So it's within reason, of course, but is it, negatively impacting you or is it affecting your performance in a poor way? When approaching the show, do I focus more on what could go wrong versus what I want to execute? So when you're coming up to a show and, are you focusing more on what could go wrong based on maybe what's happened in the past than what you actually want to do, than maybe your plan to execute something? For example, I don't know, you had a refusal last competition. Are you focusing more on what you should be worried about in terms of the jumping and what if that happens? Or are you focusing more on what's my plan for how I'm going to try and execute this differently? So what do you focus on more when that comes up? Does my horse feel tighter in the show ring than at home? Once again, within reason. A lot of our horses are different at home than in the show, right? But is it excessive? Do you really feel a difference in the tenseness and the alertness and the spookiness? Do you notice any changes in your horse at that point? And again, we talk about nervousness for horses as well. Some horses are more nervous travelers, so they just automatically are maybe a little bit more nervous because of the travel or whatnot that's coming up. But do you think it's tied to you? Is it mostly when you're performing or is it the whole time you're at the show? That's a good distinction too. Do I feel sick or nauseous when I'm at a competition? So does that ever come up for you? Do you feel more nauseous on bigger competitions that are worth more to you? Is it kind of at the end of the year at the championships that it comes up more, or qualifiers, those kinds of things? Does it prevent you from being able to eat in the morning? I fear sometimes people talk about, not being able to eat in the morning, which it's interesting. That can be a stress response, and that is likely that it's causing that, but it can be a problem because when you think about what your body and your mind needs to function, we need nutrition. Now, I'm not a nutritionist. That's not my area of expertise, but I can also understand how, in terms of like mental clarity and being able to think quickly, and we need to have our mind fueled as well. So figuring out, is that something that affects you when you're at a competition as well? Does my horse become more reactive when I'm nervous? Do you notice that your horse is more reactive to aids, to spookiness, to certain jumps? Do they become more reactive when you're in the ring versus warm up? Those kinds of things. Can you think about it from a horse's perspective? What's the difference between being in the ring and in the warm up? Not a lot, really, in that sense. It's kind of more you that knows the difference. You know when you're in warm up versus when you're in the show ring. So if your horse reacts differently in that, likely contributing to how you're feeling and what you're thinking as well. How do my nerves present? So this is another one in terms of reflection and awareness. How do you act or seem when you're nervous? Do you get very quiet? Do I get very quiet or reserved? Or do I talk really fast and appear really energetic and kind of are overstimulated that way? Me personally, for my example, I appear very quiet and reserved when I am anxious or feeling nervous before a competition. It's very different for everyone in that sense. So take a moment to kind of reflect on how it looks for you, what comes up for you in that sense as well. Okay. So now we're going to move on to my favorite one. What is emotion regulation? So, emotion regulation involves how riders recognize, manage, and respond to their emotions that occur in training and in competition. So, there's two kind of big steps to this piece. There is the emotional awareness piece, and then there's the management of emotion intensity levels. So, you need to be aware of what you're feeling, right? It's not going to help for me to give you kind of strategies on frustration, for example, when you don't know when you're feeling the frustration or what makes the frustration come on. And so a lot of the biggest piece in that is the awareness. And then it's learning how to manage it as well and manage the intensity levels, right? Some of the common emotions that are experienced by riders are fear. I need to move my little camera bubble because I can't read all my okay. Fear, excitement, anger and joy, nervousness, pride, things go well, sadness, disappointment, which is the most maybe inevitable one. And there's jealousy and frustration. So those are kind of, again, there's many more emotions that come up than that and feelings as well. Those are some of the common ones that we experience as athletes and as riders as well. And a big part for emotion regulation is co-regulation between riders. Some of you may have a more attuned horse than others. Some horses are a lot more sensitive to feelings than others. I personally had a very sensitive horse to my emotions, and I really had to learn how to regulate my emotions quickly. Well, probably not as quick as I wanted to learn it, but it really impacted it as well. And there's such a beauty and a hard part about being able to co-regulate with your horse. There's a nervous rider can create a reactive horse. So if your horse isn't naturally reactive when you're so nervous and your feelings are coming up, or you're really frustrated or angry in that sense as well, you can create a reactive horse. And that's kind of that co-regulation piece. But also a calm rider can calm a naturally reactive horse. So I personally had a naturally reactive horse. So I had to learn how to be a calm rider so that my horse was calm, and it kind of decreased his and his natural ability to be reactive in that sense as well. So there's a really good part of that. If you can learn to manage your emotions and your feelings for those moments that you're on your horse, right? Then it can really affect how they feel as well in that sense, and how they receive that and receive the input that you're giving them as well. So it's very important in that sense. You can see how it would affect your ability to ride in competition. If you're feeling so nervous, it affects them, makes them more nervous, reactive. If you're feeling happiness, they're likely feeling more calm in that sense as well. And disappointment, sadness, they can feel that too. So it's very important to learn that co-regulation piece as well and how it affects each other too. So lost my ability. There we go. Okay. What can emotion dysregulation look like? Okay. Many different examples of what dysregulation can look like. First of all, there is the experiencing intense feelings of sadness or frustration after maybe making a mistake in an event. So that can happen. That's maybe when you have mistaken dressage, some refusals in cross country, or maybe two more rails than you wanted to in that sense as well, and feeling more intense feelings of sadness and frustration. I think to a certain extent, sure, we might all feel a little bit frustrated, but do you feel that more intensely in that sense? Does it really affect you? In terms of feeling disappointed, so feeling so disappointed after getting, I don't know, X amount of rails down and it changing how you feel going into cross country. That is a hard one. I see a lot of that in terms of emotion dysregulation between phases, whether it's having a hard dressage score and being really, frustrated with that. And it kind of, you carry it into the show jumping. Maybe it's the sadness, you're kind of more low. Maybe your mood's more low, your horse is more low that way in that sense too. And the performance goes down. Or going into cross country, maybe afterwards, maybe you're feeling down, kind of what's the point? Or maybe you're feeling more anxious. If I made a mistake in that, what's going to happen out in this course? And do you carry that feeling with you into the next phase? Now, you have more time in terms of the 3-day eventing, sure, more time to regulate in that sense, but in those 1-day events, I mean, sometimes with times it can be really fast. So it's really important to learn different quick strategies to be able, so you don't carry what you're feeling from something else into the next round as well. Intensity and overlaps, maybe coming out of the ring crying due to a mistake and the sadness staying with you into the next phase of the event. When I was younger, I think during eventing, I definitely had that happen to me before when I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. I'm sure I've had that, and it definitely affected me going into other phases. So that can be something that happens as well, especially when you're experiencing the intensity of that emotion. Or acting irritated towards coaches, parents, partners, and peers after a round. I also experienced this, my poor parents, before I learned how to regulate my emotions, something where you're feeling, maybe it's really anxious, you're feeling really nervous about going into maybe the phase that's hardest for you. For me, it was maybe cross country for a while. So getting ready, feeling so anxious and, snipping that sense something as simple as your parent asking you, is this the right tool or the right brush to use, and becoming really irritated, right? And so that's what happens when you're dysregulated. So when you're more regulated and more regulated in those moments, those kinds of things don't happen as much as well. And I want to kind of emphasize the point of, is it bad to experience emotions? Absolutely not. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. I think it's extremely natural and human to feel disappointed after making a mistake and to, and to feel nervous about things coming up. And that's a really natural experience. But it's about if it's affecting your performance negatively, then we can learn to manage it in the moment. So it's not about ignoring that you're feeling that way, trying to prevent yourself from feeling anything. No, of course not. I want you to feel joy and happiness and things that come up naturally and organically for you. But it's more about how do you manage it in the moment so that your performance can stay where it needs to be as well. So it's not about it completely ignoring it. It's about, managing it until we have time to process it. Maybe it's on the car ride home. Maybe you felt, disappointed and I don't know, show jumping and you kind of learn to manage it so you can kind of perform well in cross country still. And then once you have time on the drive home, okay, what did I feel today? Did I feel a few different emotions, a few different feelings? What was going on there and what caused that? And that's your time to be able to allow yourself to feel it and process it. And that's a really important part of it as well. But it's more in terms of mental performance. We want to be able to learn how to manage it so that you can still perform well to the best of your ability. So more about managing, not ignoring. Just want to emphasize that part as well. So in terms of reflective questions on emotional awareness, these ones are a bit deeper. They're a bit longer to process in that sense. So kind of if you can get your kind of pen and paper out again, maybe even take a picture of the slide for further reflection later, and going onto your notes app on your phone to try and think about this piece. So first question, what emotions did I feel last season? I hope it's a lot. I hope it's a range of emotions. I hope you felt excitement and joy, and I hope you felt all those and pride maybe from some success. Maybe you didn't. Maybe it was maybe it was a harder year. Maybe it was a more of a growing year and you had to learn how to go through feelings of frustration and disappointment and sadness. And to take that a step further, what competitions did you feel those emotions at specifically? Um, what kind of shows were they? What were you feeling? When did the emotions come on? If you experienced frustration a lot, when did the frustration come on? What event specifically did it come on in terms of, sorry, what phase did it come up for? And how long did it last? What did you do? Those kinds of things to reflect deeper on that. Second question being, did any of my emotions interfere with myself or my horse during the competition? So was there any point where you maybe felt sadness? Did you notice a difference in your performance? Did you notice a difference in your horse and how they were presenting as well? If it was frustration, did it ever interfere with how you were able to ride, how you were able to remember things on the courses? Trying to make those ones more specific as well. Another question being, what does it feel like when I am? So kind of use a feeling that you've picked up on in terms of something that you felt last season. Let's say, what does it feel like when I am frustrated? On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not intense at all, 10 being very intense, what is the common level of intensity of my emotions? And that might have changed at different shows as well. It might have been different situations that were more triggering than others. And another follow-up question is, what were those situations? What were the kind of situations that created that feeling as well? Then there's the, how do I behave when I feel? It's an important one, especially for awareness. And you're trying to think of it like how you're feeling in the moment. If you're aware of how you behave when you feel that way, if you start to pick up on how you're acting, how you're behaving, you might be able to, have more awareness and reflection into what are you feeling right now. If it's something where, that can be many different things. If it's, feeling frustrated, walking away, is it kind of feeling really nervousness? Is it pacing? Is it, talking really fast? Those kinds of things. How do you behave? Do you become more irritable with certain people close to you? Is that something that kind of comes up when maybe it's feeling irritable, feeling frustrated, feeling anxious, feeling nervous? How do you act when you feel? And is it consistent? Is it kind of the same behavior and same thing you do every time? Is there certain things that change that? and kind of taking time to gain some awareness on that for yourself as well. And what do I think to myself when I feel? It's also a really important one to be attuned with as well in terms of your awareness. What do I think to myself when I feel disappointed? Maybe the thought is, I failed. Say I made a mistake in a round. I feel disappointed. I feel sad. My thought to myself is, I'm a failure, or I failed at that. So trying to remember, and it can be hard in terms of that sense to remember exactly what you were thinking. So try to be attuned with that in terms of the experience. Maybe there's one certain experience you can remember and use that one experience to identify what triggered you, what the feeling was, what the intensity was, how did you act, what did you think? Those kinds of things that come up as well can be easier to reflect on as well. Okay. So now we'll go into burnout. Now, this is one that's not as talked about as much, but it's very relevant still in that sense. So for riders, a burnout involves a physical, mental, and emotional state of exhaustion. So it's caused by a prolonged, intense exposure to training and competition. So burnout can lead to a loss of motivation in that sense, feeling really unmotivated to go to training days, go to lessons, just to ride as well, but also to plan your show season, to go to certain events and to prepare for certain events. Reduce performance, that mental, emotional, physical fatigue chronically is going to significantly impact how you can ride, how you think clearly in those moments, how your activity to your quickness and how you make decisions quickly in your competition, and emotional withdrawal from the sport and from your horse as well. Not feeling as attuned with your horse, not feeling as attuned or maybe excited. If you once felt really excited for every show and you don't feel that anymore, that's kind of an example of that emotional withdrawal as well. Um, and it can look like feelings of indifference. So maybe it's not necessarily a dramatic feeling of, not wanting to show up to your training rides or plan your competitions, but it can maybe more so be that indifference of not really happy to do it, not really sad to do it, but not really having that feeling towards it. And that can be for general riding and competition as well. There's the emotional fog that comes along with it. There is the aspect of avoiding riding or maybe creating excuses for not wanting to compete or ride. Irritability towards your horse, that's another one that comes up. If you horse does something that normally wouldn't irritate you and would normally be fine, and it really irritates you consistently, that's another sign of that as well. And just chronic fatigue in that sense as well. So it's hard in the sport because we do a lot of training and competing in that sense, and it's really hard to prevent it, but it can happen. And so some of the causes of it are overtraining. I kind of pair that with the perfectionism. Sometimes when you're experiencing perfectionism and you want things to go so well and be so perfect, you maybe overtrain more than you normally would in that sense because you're so worried about, failing or so worried about wanting it to go really well or perfect in that sense that can cause overtraining and exhaustion over time. There's the high pressure as well. That can come from, emotionally as well, high pressure causing chronic anxiety. So if you're constantly facing the high pressure, maybe it's from perfectionism as well, or just pressure that you're putting on yourself or others are putting on you, you can live in a state of chronic stress and chronic nervousness and chronic anxiety. And so that can cause that mental part and emotional part of burnout as well. Repeated setbacks, it's a hard one. If you're kind of experiencing many mistakes or hard setbacks, or maybe it's eliminations or setbacks in upgrading, that can be really hard emotionally as well in terms of that burnout. Not prioritizing rest properly. I like talking about this one because we prioritize rest so well for our horses. We talk about we're so specific in how we know exactly how many days we want to give our horse off after an event. We know what we're going to do on those days. We know, and it depends on which type of event. Is it, a 1 day or a 3 day, and what's the level and how much time are we going to give them off and make sure that they get their rest as well. But we're not that great at prioritizing rest for ourselves on those days. And so we're clearly good at it because we're able to do it for our teammate, but we're not really able to do it for ourselves as well. And that's something that can cause over time, and it can contribute to that burnout or not engaging in self-care. Self-care is something I'll probably talk about a lot in the next session. It's so, so important. And I want you to have so many different tools with that. There's things that are 10 minutes, 10-minute self-care activities. There's an hour, there's a whole afternoon or a whole day, and trying to think of what are the different things that work for you in terms of self-care that promote that relaxation, and checking out for a moment where you're able to promote that, and things that you need to have things that are both really quick and things that take more time. Because if you only have things that take more time, again, so hard to schedule everything as well. So we need to have things that are quick, you can do more frequently to help with that for flexibility and scheduling, but also some big things too for when you do have that time as well. So we'll get into more of that in the next, seminar as well, but that can be a really significant cause to burnout as well. So I want to talk about burnout versus normal fatigue, because there is quite a difference there. I mean, we talk about everyone feeling tired after maybe it's, 3 back-to-back shows or doing a big FEI that involves a lot of travel, and there's going to be normal fatigue levels, right? So we want to go through the differences of that in terms of when it's burnout, when it's normal fatigue. So normal fatigue improves with rest. It's more physical based and improves with rest. The more rest you get, the less fatigued you'll feel. So kind of after maybe it's, going to a 3-day event that involves a lot of travel and you're feeling exhausted, you get a good rest and you kind of can improve throughout that week through your fatigue. Burnout does not improve with rest. It doesn't improve when you get more sleep or more downtime quickly. I mean, prolonged, yes, but sleep-wise, it doesn't necessarily improve with rest. That lingering fatigue is still always there in that sense with burnout. In terms of normal fatigue, it's temporary. So again, you kind of have a big show or a few big shows, you feel tired for maybe a week. At that point, that's normal. That's temporary, and it kind of fades after that. When you get more rest, it's temporary. Burnout is not that way. It's very prolonged and it's chronic. It might be something you experience for a year. It might be something you experience the whole season and months after or before. Normal fatigue, you still stay motivated. So despite feeling tired and being really busy, you're still really engaged and you're motivated. You still want to do the next show. You still want to show up to your training rides. That motivation is still there. In burnout, there's a loss of passion, which is really sad. There's that loss of spark and motivation and passion for wanting to show up and do your training rides and go to your competitions. And that's what happens there with burnout, is that loss of passion. And normal fatigue, it's more physical tiredness in that sense as well. Whereas burnout, while it involves physical tiredness, it's mostly emotional exhaustion. It's a lot more mentally there in that sense. And you can see how that affects performance in that sense. And we're feeling mentally and emotionally exhausted. First of all, that contributes to your ability to regulate. A lot of more potential to have you dysregulated in between those phases there when emotions do come up. Focus can be really hard when you're experiencing that fatigue all the time, and that motivation to want to show up, to want to learn more, to want to go to the next one doing better. So that's when that's not there, your performance is really hindered in that sense as well. So in terms of reflecting questions there, let's go through these ones kind of again, reflecting either internally or writing it down for yourself, or kind of taking a picture, saving it for a time where you have more time to go deeper into this. But the first question being, did you experience a loss of motivation at any point in the season last year? Maybe it was just for a couple days. Maybe it was kind of that like a month. Maybe it was a long time. Maybe it was the season. Did you experience a loss of motivation at any point? And what was happening for you around that time? When looking back at your season, did you prioritize rest for yourself as much as you prioritized it for your horse? And it might not be equal. It's not necessarily, is it equal? But do you feel like within a general realm, do you feel like you prioritized it kind of similarly to how you prioritized it for your horse, for rest and for time to recharge? And if not, what were the barriers? What were some of the reasons as to why you did not prioritize it for yourself as much? Because it's in terms of, this kind of whole session being about reflection and awareness, I kind of want to know those pieces in terms of, sorry, sorry about that. In terms of what's coming up, is it work? Is it other activities? Is it not having the time? What are those barriers specifically that makes it hard for you to prioritize yourself as much as it is for your horse? Did you experience a lack of excitement for competitions where you normally feel excitement and joy towards them? Are you a person that normally gets really excited towards your competitions, and do you experience a lack of that? Was it ever muted? Think about maybe were there, first of all, any specific events where that happened more than others if it did? Were there other feelings that played a role in that? Was it certain maybe events or situations that caused a lack of that excitement? And when you look back at your schedule from last year, how do you feel like you did? Did you do too much? Could you have done more? Maybe you felt really charged at the end of the season. Do you feel like you could maybe do more? Or do you feel like do you feel happy and satisfied with the amount of training competing you did? Did you kind of, if you didn't really experience that burnout, you felt really satisfied at the end of the year, you felt like you kind of pushed yourself, you did all you could, and you also still didn't feel burnt out and you felt ready to go still? Were you satisfied with it? And can you replicate it in that sense as well? Maybe you did feel satisfied, you're not experiencing that. Maybe you did experience more burnout at certain points. And again, this part isn't really the action plan of what can you do differently. It's did you experience it at all? It's kind of being attuned with how you're feeling about it and your awareness with it as well. Okay, so reflecting is not a one-time experience. I appreciate you being able to go through these questions with me and kind of briefly begin to reflect on that. Maybe you're really good at reflecting and you've already done all of this, which is great. And if not, there's something new, I'd encourage you to try and keep these reflection questions in your back pocket for the rest of the winter and continue to try and reflect on them. See how deep you can go into it, especially with those feelings questions as well, in terms of how we assess it. And see what areas you want to improve on. What do you feel like, what areas affected your performance the most? And continue to reflect on that. It's not a one-time process. The more you reflect on it, the maybe deeper understanding or memory you'll have of the different scenarios as well. So try to continue reflecting on that this winter. In terms of deeper role, in terms of a therapeutic perspective, having awareness can be very helpful. But if you don't know how to decrease the frequency of maybe the emotions that are occurring for you, therapy can be very helpful in terms of improving, those strategies that you're learning maybe in the next seminar as well, in terms of, mental performance, continuing to learn those strategies, learn ones that work better than others, and understanding more of the core root cause of the feeling that you're unable to decrease the reoccurrence of. So, for example, if you're feeling really anxious for each event, and the strategies are working well, yay, they're working well, things are going well, you're still able to perform well, but the frequency of the anxiety occurring is not decreasing. So it keeps happening for a couple of years, or it's been happening, and maybe you can manage it, but it keeps coming up. So, working to uncover why the reaction is there. Is it perfectionism? Is it how you respond to pressure? Is it what the pressures are? How can you reframe those pressures? That's more where therapeutic work comes in as well. Or if the strategies you're trying are not working, or if you've experienced something traumatic, in training or riding. Maybe it's an accident, maybe it's a fall. Maybe it's something in your personal life that you've experienced, a life event that's been traumatic that is affecting your now performance as well. Those are some things that we can kind of process deeper in terms of a therapeutic lens as well. So for me, I offer therapeutic services in that sense. My services are all virtual, which is really convenient for wherever you are in Ontario, but also very convenient for things like things that happen right after a show, things that happen during at the show as well, or before, kind of a tune up in that sense, or general therapy and too, in terms of processing how you're feeling and working to uncover the root cause and why. So that's where my role in that sense comes in a deeper lens. So now I'd like to take some time to open things up to share. Before we go further into this, I would like to pause the recording and to stop it because I want everyone to feel comfortable to be able to share your experiences if anything resonated with you. So we are going to do a Q&A section. We are going to leave time for that as well, for you to ask, first of all, any questions that came up for you today or things that you'd like to request of areas that you want to learn strategies for. But before we go into that, I'd love to hear more in terms of anything that resonated with you about today, in terms of we talked about going through the reflective questions of, performance anxiety or emotion regulation or burnout, and either as specific or as unspecific if you want to be in that sense as well. I kind of shared a few of my experiences as we went along. So I'd love to hear from you guys in terms of your experiences with this as well, if you have any, and something that resonates with you, something that you've experienced maybe last season or in previous seasons.